My name is Alexander, and ever since I was a child, I always felt different from others. I was shorter than my classmates, quieter, and certainly more timid. At school, my stature and reserved personality made me an easy target for bullies. They mocked me every day, often pushing me or making me fall for fun. I still remember those moments when they made me feel so small, as if I had no worth. Every day I came home with the weight of those insults, feeling invisible and, at the same time, the center of all the laughter. My parents always tried to lift my spirits, telling me that things would get better as I grew up, that all that pain would pass. However, deep down, I knew they didn't understand how hurt I was. One day, seeing me particularly down, they decided to give me a special gift, a cat. I still remember the feeling of warmth and love when they brought home Joss, a gray kitten with blue eyes. From the very first moment, I felt a deep bond with him. Petting him calmed me, making me feel less alone. It was as if I finally had someone who understood me, someone who didn't judge me for my appearance or the way I was. Every day after school, I would rush home just to be with him. We spent hours together, him curled up on my lap while I read or watched television. When I was sad, Joe seemed to know. He would look at me with those deep eyes, and the simple fact that he was there, close to me, gave me a bit of hope. He was my best friend, the only presence that made me feel loved unconditionally. I never imagined that my life could change so quickly and so devastatingly. One day, when I was only 15 years old, my parents went out for dinner with friends. They had never been out so late, but that evening, time seemed to drag, and the silence in the house began to make me uncomfortable. Joss followed me wherever I went, as if he too sensed something strange in the air. Then the call came. It was the police. A drunk driver had lost control of his car and had driven my parents' car off the road. They didn't make it. In an instant, my life had crumbled. I remember dropping the phone as everything around me blurred. The world I knew no longer existed. I was completely alone. Those weeks were a nightmare. The pain was so intense that I felt almost numb, as if I were in a dream from which I couldn't wake up. My parents, my only family, were gone, and I was left alone with my cat. Joss, as always, was there. He stayed by my side every time I cried, kept me company during long, sleepless nights, and gave me a reason to get out of bed each morning. His affection was the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. I was only 15, and the whole world seemed to have collapsed on me. But there was Joss, always there, always ready to make me feel that I wasn't completely alone. As the years passed, my life became a long and solitary routine. After school, I decided to become an electrician. It was a solid job, something that kept me busy and allowed me not to think too much. However, I couldn't form bonds with anyone. I had become even more closed off than I was as a child. I had no friends and didn't even try to make any. Every day was the same. Wake up, go to work, come home, and spend time with Joss. He had become my only companion. People at work tried to talk to me, to invite me out, but I always refused. I didn't feel comfortable with people. The laughter I heard in the office reminded me too much of the malicious laughter of the bullies from my childhood. So, I avoided everyone, preferring the solitude of my home and the silent company of Joss. He was the only one who seemed to understand me, the only one who didn't make me feel flawed for who I was. Sometimes I wondered if I would ever be happy, if my life would ever change. But every time I looked at Joss, I convinced myself that maybe in some way I didn't need anything else. Everything changed on a rainy day while I was coming home from work. Like every evening, I was ready to prepare dinner and spend the evening with Joss. But when I arrived home, I found him outside in the yard, lying on the ground with a large wound on his neck. Blood stained his gray fur, and I felt the world collapse around me once again. Panic seized me. I didn't know what to do. I picked him up, feeling his weak body in my arms, and ran to the veterinarian. Every minute felt like an eternity. I hoped and prayed that he could be saved, but the vet didn't give me much hope. "We'll do our best," he said, "but there's not much we can do. The medication will keep him out of pain, but I don't think he'll hold on." Those words hit me like a punch. I sat in that cold waiting room, unable to think about anything other than the possibility of losing my best friend. It was as if I were reliving all that pain I felt years before when I lost my parents. I couldn't lose him. I couldn't face that kind of loss again. The following days were a nightmare. Joss was under observation at the vet, and I couldn't find peace. Every call from the vet was a heartache. His condition was stable, but not improving. I felt helpless, trapped in a spiral of anxiety and panic that didn't allow me to think clearly. I couldn't concentrate at work. Every little thing made me think of the worst. The fear of losing Joss pressed on my chest like a vice that wouldn't let me breathe. Nights were the worst. I sat on the empty bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Memories of my parents' death invaded my mind, mixing with the anguish of losing Joss. The images of the accident, the pain I felt then, overlapped with my current fear. It was as if every trauma of my life was resurfacing, overwhelming me. I felt like I had no control over anything, and that terrified me. One day during one of my worst moments, I decided to do something I knew was wrong but seemed like the only way out at that moment. I couldn't handle the panic and pain anymore. I remembered some old schoolmates, those who had bullied me as a child. I had seen them a few times at the park, always in groups, laughing and joking among themselves. I knew most of them had ended up in bad situations. Many had become drug dealers. So on a dark and cold evening, I decided to go to them. I didn't even know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe just an escape route, some form of oblivion. I found them in the usual park, sitting on a bench, smoking and exchanging pills. They didn't ask too many questions. Maybe they remembered me, maybe not, but they immediately understood what I wanted. One of them handed me a bag full of pills. He told me they would help me relax, that all the pain would pass. I didn't think twice. I took the bag and left without saying a word. Back home, I felt angry and frustrated, but above all, I felt like a failure. How could I have fallen so low? I sat on the couch staring at those pills on the table in front of me. I was trapped in a storm of emotions: anger, fear, pain. I saw no other way out. I took a handful of those pills, convinced they would make me forget everything, even if only for a while. But I took too many. My vision began to blur, the world around me growing increasingly distant. I felt my body fall to the floor. At that moment, I was sure it was the end. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in my living room. I was in a place I had never seen before. But at the same time, it felt familiar. The air was warm, and there was a golden light all around me, enveloping me as if I were floating in a sea of peace. There was no pain, no fear. It was as if all my suffering had vanished in an instant. Suddenly, a figure approached me. I couldn't believe my eyes. Standing before me was Jesus, or at least that's how it seemed to me. I had never really believed in these things, but at that moment, there was no doubt. He was there, in front of me, looking at me with compassion. His eyes seemed to hold all the knowledge in the world, and I felt a strange sense of acceptance. I didn't need to explain anything to him. He already knew everything. I began to cry. All the repressed emotions, the pain, the guilt, the anger, exploded inside me. I knelt down, unable to speak a word. He gently touched my shoulder, and in that gesture was a deep understanding, an awareness that made me suddenly feel light. "Why have I suffered so much in life?" I asked him with a trembling voice, looking into his eyes. It was the question that had stayed with me for years, the question I had never had the courage to ask anyone. He smiled at me, a smile full of warmth and love. "Every suffering has a purpose," he replied. "Even if you don't understand it now, there is a greater plan. Every pain you have felt has made you the person you are. But your life is not over. There is still much you need to do, much love you need to give and receive." Those words struck me like lightning. I realized that I had been trying to escape the pain my entire life. But maybe there was indeed a reason for everything. I felt small and insignificant, yet at the same time, part of something immensely larger. Then Jesus took my hand and led me toward a house. It was a house I immediately recognized. My old home, the one where I grew up with my parents. The door opened by itself, and when I entered, I saw them, my parents. They were there, in front of me, alive and smiling. I couldn't believe my eyes. I threw myself toward them, hugging them tightly. Tears kept flowing, but this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of joy. "I'm sorry," I said. my voice broken by emotion. I'm sorry for everything, for the life I had, for not being strong enough. My mother stroked my hair, just like she used to when I was little. You don't have to apologize for anything, my love, she said gently. You've done your best, and we are so proud of you. You've lived through and overcome so much, and you're still here. My father added, it hasn't been easy, we know, but you're still in time to change. Everything. Your life is in your hands. Before leaving, however, a thought crossed my mind. My cat, Joss, I think he's about to die. I'll never see him again. How will I manage without him? My mother smiled at me again. Don't worry, Joss will recover. He'll stay with you for a few more years. But when the time comes, he'll come up here with us, and we will welcome him with love, just as we have welcomed you now. Then they pointed to Jesus. He told us that. The last thing I remember before feeling my body being pulled downward, as if I were falling out of a dream, was waking up lying on my living room floor, confused, with my heart pounding and my breath heavy. I couldn't tell if what I had experienced was a dream or something else, but I felt inside that it was more real than any other experience in my life. My body was still weak, but my mind was clear, as if I had gone through something profound and finally found an answer. As soon as I got up, the phone rang. It was the veterinarian. Marco, I don't know how to tell you, he said with a voice full of surprise, but your cat, Joss, woke up this morning. He's much better. It's as if he miraculously recovered. I paused for a moment, unable to speak. His words echoed in my mind like a distant echo. Joss was better. He had woken up. At that moment, a feeling of warmth spread throughout my body. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper. The confirmation that the miracle I had experienced was real. I hadn't lost my best friend. Not yet. The following days passed in a haze of disbelief and gratitude. Joss returned home, and for the next 2 years, I lived every moment with him as a precious gift. I knew that time with him wouldn't be eternal, but I was no longer afraid of losing him. When after 2 years he left me forever, I was ready. The pain was there, yes, but there was also peace. I knew that one day I would see him again, that he would return to my parents, as he had been promised. What I didn't expect, however, was how my life would change. The fear, the loneliness, the anger that had dominated my days for so long began to fade. I realized that I was no longer the same person. Something inside me had transformed, something I couldn't even fully explain. I woke up every day with a new awareness. Life is a gift, and even the most intense pain can lead to something extraordinary. I learned that we can't control everything that happens to us, but we can choose how to react. I chose to live, to love, to open up to others. I found love in a woman who shares my same love for cats, and together, we decided to build a life. We talked about having children, and for the first time, I no longer fear loving and losing. I know that everything I've experienced has prepared me to be the person I am today. What have I learned? I learned that pain is not the end. I learned that we are not alone, even in the darkest moments. Even when everything seems lost, life, even when it seems unbearable, always has something to teach us. I learned that every suffering, every wound, can be transformed into love, into strength, into growth. And what should everyone do? I want to tell anyone reading this story not to give up. I know there are moments when everything seems pointless, when the world appears unjust and cruel. But please don't stop believing that there is something greater, something waiting for you beyond the pain. Every heartbeat you still feel in your chest is proof that you have a reason to be here, that there is something beautiful yet to come. The message I received from Jesus shook me, made me reflect deeply. Everything you carry with you at the end of life is what you have given. Those words stayed with me, etched in my heart. They changed me. No matter how much we think we have lost, no matter how many scars we carry inside, what matters is the love we give, the impact we leave on others' lives. Now I live every day trying to give as much love as possible. I strive to be kind, to listen, to offer a hand to those in need. Because in the end, what truly remains is the love we have sown along the way. It's not always easy. There will still be difficult moments, days of despair. But I have learned that even on those days, there is hope. If I could leave you with one thought, it would be this. Don't let pain consume you. Use it to build something greater. Be kind to yourself. Forgive yourself for the mistakes you've made. And above all, never stop loving. Even when everything seems lost, there is always a new beginning waiting for you, a new chance to be happy. Joe's saved my life more times than I can count, and now I know that his love, just like that of my parents and Jesus, is always with me. I will never truly be alone, because the bond we built in this life never fades. Please remember this. Every act of love we perform lives forever.